All right, so in today's video, I'm going to talk about how you can safely load your boat on your trailer. I got this idea from one of my subscribers from a comment they left on a video, and I think it's a good idea. I do see a lot of people out there loading their boat in different ways, and I do believe that there are only a few different ways that are going to be the most safe for loading your boat without incurring some damage on your boat. So I'm going to go ahead and break that down into a couple of different methods. But I'll start by talking about some of the differences between boats. So most of the time I am talking about an inboard where the motor and the drive or the transmission is completely housed within inside the boat. And the only thing that comes out of the boat is the shaft and the propeller at the end of the shaft, and then there's a rudder behind that. But obviously there are what are referred to as inboard/outboards, and that is where the motor is inside the boat but the outdrive and the propeller are outside the boat, and you can actually turn the entire drive, move the drive up and down. It gives you more ability to maneuver the boat. And then there's also outdrive boats where the entire motor and transmission is all one unit outside of the boat, and again you can move it up and down and turn it side to side, so you have more maneuverability there. And finally, in the last several years, there's a new element that's been brought to the table, which is a thruster or thrusters that can either be mounted at the front of the boat somehow or the rear of the boat. And now it's more commonly a thruster that's mounted at the rear or the transom of the boat. In any of the scenarios where you either have a thruster or you have an inboard/outboard or you have an outboard, in all of those scenarios you're going to have more maneuverability, so it's not as hard to load your boat on the trailer, because at very low speeds you can turn that prop or you can use that thruster to push through your rear end side to side pretty quickly. So the two methods I'm going to talk about in this video really are in regards to handling an inboard at low speeds, but a lot of these principles could be applied to all of those scenarios. So I did make a video a while back where I talked about how to drive your inboard at low speeds, but not specifically loading it on a trailer. If you're interested in watching that video, I'll put a link to that video right here. So next I want to talk about what I think you should do to make loading your boat as efficient as possible, so that way you're not holding up the line or just basically frustrating other people that want to load their boat or launch their boat, one of those things. I did make a video on that topic about being courteous at the dock. It is one of my more popular videos, so if you want to check that out, I'll put a link to that video right here. I will give you some brief tips there. I do believe that it is best if you have the capability to do this. For example, if it's more than just you in your boat that day. For example, if you're fishing alone, this would not apply to you. But as long as you have at least another person with you that can handle back in the trailer into the water, my suggestion is that you just drop that person off at the dock and you get away from the dock, giving the chance for others to launch and load their boats, and you're not in their way. And that person goes and gets the truck and the trailer and backs it down, and then you can go ahead and load. I suggest this method as opposed to bringing your boat up to the dock and actually tying it to the dock while you go get your truck and trailer. Obviously, if you're fishing alone or if you're just out on the lake by yourself with your boat, that's your only option. So I'm not trying to hate on that scenario. I just suggest, if you have the ability to be as efficient as possible, so that way you're helping other people have enough time at the dock and get out on the water or get out of the water, whatever it may be. So that being said, now I'll go into the two different methods I suggest for safely loading your boat without incurring damage. The first method is going to be what I think is the easiest method for a beginner or somebody with not much experience, or those people who simply just want to be very, very, very careful. And so you may have lots of experience driving an inboard boat or a boat in general, but you just want to be extra, extra careful. So the first method is to have your driver of the truck and trailer back the trailer into the water, and then you just go up to the dock and turn off the engine, and then you just walk your boat onto the trailer. You might even have a rope tied to the front that you're pulling the boat with. A lot of times what I'll see people do, or I've done even before, is I'll just hold on to the tower. It's kind of the center point of the boat, and I'll just pull it along the dock until I get to the trailer. And then once you get it to the trailer and kind of get it in between your guide poles, or if you don't have guide poles, just get it kind of close to the trailer, you're going to hop into the water. and then you're just going to kind of pull your boat onto the bunk boards until you can't pull it anymore. Then you're going to grab your winch hook from the front of the trailer and pull it back and clip it onto the boat, and then start winching it up to the front of the trailer. And keep in mind, when you have the driver of the truck and trailer back in the trailer in, you don't have to have it all the way in. You could have it, maybe 2/3 of the way in, enough for the boat. That way the boat stops at the bunks, and then you can actually, once you have the boat hooked up to your winch, you can have them back in a little further. In fact, that's how I do it every time. As far as once I hook it up to the winch, the first part of that I do differently every time, which is going to be the second method that I described. But that is a very safe way. You're just slowly guiding it onto your boat. You're not driving it on. You're not accidentally hitting something. If it's a really windy day, something to that effect. You're controlling it the whole time. You might even have a couple of people helping you walk your boat up, depending on how big your boat is. But just basically slowly guiding it onto your trailer without using the power of the boat. You're just kind of slowly walking it onto the boat. So that's the first method, and I apologize, I don't have any visuals for that because that's not how I typically do it. If I see somebody doing that again someday, maybe I'll remember to take some video. But yeah, basically walking it on to your trailer is probably the very safest method. Definitely not the most efficient, but depending on your experience, how safe you want to be, it definitely is going to be one of the safer ways to load your boat on trailer, especially if it's an inboard boat. So now I'm going to talk about method 2, which I do have a lot of visuals for because this is how I load my boat every single time. So the second method is to basically drive the boat onto the trailer. And this method is typically much easier for an inboard/outboard boat, or a complete outboard boat, or a boat that has thrusters. But there is a method for making sure that you get onto that trailer pretty safely. You just need to get yourself comfortable with doing this, and it's best if you get yourself comfortable doing this on calm days as opposed to windy days first, because windy or basically really rough days where the water's coming in at the side or something to that effect, that's going to affect your ability to get it on there quite a bit. But the more experience you get, the easier this becomes. But basically, what you'll want to do is have your person that's going to drive your truck and trailer and back it in, have them back it in again only 2/3 of the way. It's important that you only do it about 2/3 of the way because you want the bunk boards to catch the boat. You don't want the stop and the winch at the front of the trailer to catch the boat, because you can do damage to the winch or your boat that way. So you want the bunks, as your boat comes in, you want the bunks to catch your boat. But you also don't want to be too far out of the water and have the boat ramp catch your prop. So usually about 2/3 of having your trailer in the water, about 2/3 of what it would need to be able to get your boat all the way up to the stop point or where the winch is. And it's a good idea to kind of have a visual mark on your trailer somewhere where the water line hits to know how far to go in. And it can be different depending on the boat ramp. There are 2 boat ramps I usually go to in the year, and they do differ from each other. One's a little steeper than the other, so that line changes. But it would be good, you could maybe even put a physical mark on it to know where that is when you back the trailer in. It could be on the guide poles. That's usually what we use as a guide, is where the water level is on the guide poles. But it might even be where it is on the front of the trailer, that you know how far to go in, where the water line is going to hit, to be about 2/3 of the way in the water from where your boat needs to be to just be caught by the bunks. Okay, and I say 2/3 because if you have your trailer in the water far enough to where you can winch your boat all the way up to the front of the trailer, then it's 2/3 from that, 2/3 of the depth from that, typically. You can't be in the water enough to winch it up, otherwise the bunks won't catch it enough. It'll actually slam into the stop. And that's actually happened to me a few times. Luckily, I got away with no damage, but I've seen stuff get damaged in that way before. So just keep in mind, try to get a good idea of what depth your trailer needs to be so that the bunks catch your boat. And then again, you can have your driver back the trailer in a little more to winch it all the way up to the front. That being said, once you have your trailer in the water the appropriate amount, then the driver of the boat is going to be kind of out away from the launch a ways. I would say a solid 100 feet, maybe more, maybe even 200 feet. And you're going to basically turn around and make sure you're coming in lined up. And I usually actually tip my head over into the middle, so that way my head is centered with the nose of the bow, and I use the nose of the bow as kind of my sights, kind of like the sights on a gun, and I'll look down that as I'm driving in. And probably the most important thing here is that you keep your shift lever or your throttle in the very first position, so the slowest position. And even newer boats these days have what they call a dock mode, so it can even be a lower speed, but that's not necessary. I do it all the time without that. You just want to make sure that the boat is always keeping forward momentum, so that way when you adjust the steering, it has an effect, because once you put it in neutral, it has a lot less effect when you turn the wheel. So adjusting your direction and where you're headed becomes much harder once you take the throttle off. You're heading in, you're lining up the nose of the boat with the stop point on the trailer, and you're basically just guiding in. And this is more nerve-wracking and a little more difficult when you have a pickle fork bow, because it doesn't come to a great point. So you're always worried about the two edges of your pickle fork bow hitting your guide poles, and I've seen many guide poles bent from that very situation. But as long as you're lining up the very middle of the front of your boat with the stop on the front of the trailer all the way in, then you really shouldn't hit those guide poles. There's enough room there. So then you're keeping that throttle in that first position, and you just keep going in that same scenario, in that same fashion, until the nose of your boat gets to the guide poles, and then I pull off the throttle. I put the throttle in neutral and then just let it float on, and just let it keep that forward momentum and float onto the trailer. And then what happens is typically your boat's going to start hitting the bunks and slowing down, and then also it may or may not touch the guide pole on one side or the other and kind of shift it correctly into position. And because I've put the shift lever into neutral, then I'm avoiding extra damage to the prop if for some reason it were to hit the trailer. But by using this method, I, knock on wood, have never hit my prop on the trailer. And I think a lot of that has to do with how you put the trailer into the water, how deep into the water it is, and how good your guide poles are. If they're bent out of alignment, then that might let you shift far enough to where you could hit the trailer. But as long as they're in alignment and you don't hit them too hard, for example, you keep the speed on and you're too far one way, then it really shouldn't. Those guide poles really should keep you from hitting your trailer with the prop. But even if you did hit your trailer with the prop, if the propeller is not moving, it's going to have a lot less effect than if it was moving. So that's why right when the nose of my boat gets to the guide poles, gets right in between the guide poles, that's why I'm taking the shift lever back to neutral so that it can stop before it even gets to the trailer. That's probably a lot of information for those of you who have never tried that, but I'm going to just kind of briefly review that again, and just kind of hit the key points. So make sure the truck driver or trailer backing the trailer in puts the trailer about 2/3 of the way in the water from where it would be to be able to get it all the way winched up to the front. Obviously, if it's 2/3 in the water, you're not going to be able to winch it up to the front unless it's a very light boat. So 2/3 of the way into the water. Then make sure that you start from about 100 to 200 feet back from the trailer as you're coming in with the boat, and make sure you keep that shift lever in the very first position, the slowest it can go, and keep it in that position. And then make sure you're lining up the nose of the boat with the front of the trailer as you go in, and make sure, like I said, I usually tip my head in to make sure it's in the center of the boat to line it up, and then just keep going forward until the nose of the boat gets to the guide poles, and then pull that shift lever back to neutral, and then let the bunk boards just catch it. Okay, so from there, it's the same as the first method. You're just going to grab the winch, hook it up to the front of the boat, get it tightened, and then maybe have your driver back in a little bit so that the trailer is submerged enough to where you can winch the boat all the way up to the stop point, and that's it. As long as you follow one of those two methods, you really should not be incurring damage on your boat. Keep in mind, if there's a lot of wind and you're not in a protected bay, then you're going to be feeling the effects of the wind on the side of your boat and the waves on the side of your boat, or from whichever direction they're coming from. Or even if you're in a protected bay, you're going to at least be feeling the wind kind of like a sail on your boat, maybe not the waves so much. In those scenarios, you have to correct. So for example, if the wind was coming at me hard from the starboard side, the trailer might be over here as I'm coming in, and I might have to start over here and kind of slowly, I might be aiming straight forward, but it's kind of pushing me to the side as I come in. So you have to take those things into consideration. And again, it might be best to get used to this method when it's really calm out, and maybe revert to the first method where you walk it onto the trailer if it's a super windy day out. There's definitely been times, as I've been learning to do this myself, where I'm coming in and I just don't feel right about it, so then I quickly go into reverse and back off and come back and try it again. So don't worry, you can always back out of it. It also helps if you're just learning how to do this and you're not quite comfortable with it yet. It helps if you do it with multiple people on the boat. That way, if you end up getting too close to the dock, those people can go out and push away from the dock, things like that. So I hope this information was helpful. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have any thoughts on this video or ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments below. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe and click that notifications bell so you'll be notified of my future videos. I'll see you next week.